The nerfs to Silver Surfer and ZABU are now live in Marvel Snap. What does this change about the current meta, and who are the biggest winners and losers post-balance update? We're going to take a look at all the patch notes and take a look at these winners and losers in this video. So if you're ready for it, Marvel Snap fans, you know what to do. Find that like button and let's go snap it!
ValleyFlyin.
Hello, Marvel Snap fans. Welcome back to the Valley Snap channel. I am ValleyFlyin. I hope you're having a great day, and I hope you're enjoying these nerfs to Silver Surfer and ZABU, making many more decks a lot more relevant in Marvel Snap. Now, we're going to talk about these changes, who are the biggest winners and losers in this video. But if this is your first time here on the channel, hit that subscribe button for more great Marvel Snap content. At least 5 Marvel Snap videos per week on this channel about news. We got deck videos and everything else to help your Marvel Snap experience to make the game as enjoyable for you as possible. But let's go right into these dev notes. So this was a balance change that went live yesterday. We were teased about this last week as the new patch went live, and we were expecting sometime when this season came about that there would be nerfs coming to ZABU and Surfer, and it did happen yesterday. Today's balance changes marks our first ever over-the-air change to card content without using a patch. Many of you may be wondering why we're taking this action, so I'm going to walk you through some of our balance philosophies, the metrics that led to our changes, and the adjustments we're working to make for Surfer and ZABU. Now, the big question is, why do they balance? Well, Marvel Snap's content release model gives our metagame a unique texture. By releasing a new card each week, we want to hopefully constantly provide something new and exciting to look forward for players. But this requires a diverse metagame featuring opportunity for innovation and exploring. And what they say is the game is at its most fun with a large variety of viable decks featuring many different cards. It's awesome to see the individual cards succeed, but we need that success to exist within a spectrum that allows many other cards to flourish. So I like that they're constantly looking at this stuff, constantly looking at their game, constantly looking at their meta, and constantly balancing out things that get too strong and get too overplayed. So their general process for balancing is Snap. Every week, the design group looks at both metrics for individual cards and clusters, which are the groups of cards that most commonly make up various decks. For the individual cards, what they're gonna do is they're gonna focus on win percentage when drawn, popularity, cube contribution, and the number of cubes a card yields. And that is what they're doing with Silver Surfer. For card clusters, and this is where more ZABU was affected, and all the clusters of cards that he could implement towards the end game. We focus on win percentage against the field, average cubes per game, the percentage of all games using that cluster and its matchups. Each of these values have tolerances, and that was determined whether making a balance change. Exceeding one tolerance doesn't mandate a buff or a nerf, but it does build the watch list, which we've already heard about. When a card goes on the watch, we discuss potential changes and begin playtesting them just in case. And if things don't improve on their metrics in the live game, that is when they will make the change. So we'd expect more of these changes if cards get too imbalanced. And that's a good thing, because I think the overall gameplay is the most important thing. Now, I know there's some people that purchased some of these cards or wondering, hey, I purchased these cards. I purchased them at a certain power level and now they're different. I think that's fine. I also purchased these cards, got to enjoy them for a while, and now it's having now they're involved in a healthy game meta right now. All right, so weakening these 2 season passes cards wasn't a light decision. It's paramount that we protect our gameplay, but the team also takes seriously that players trust us to be responsible as stewards of our content. These changes aren't meant to delete ZABU or Surfer, just give other cards more room. And I think they do that pretty well. You know, they give these cards, they're still effective, but they're not going to be meta defining. I think like 5 or 6 of the top 10 decks in the meta featured ZABU in one shape or another. So I think these are good changes. The individual cards performance for ZABU was not strong, but it was strong, but it wasn't amazing. It did crack the top 5 cards for most January, which is where you usually find troublemakers. ZABU's dominance only became apparent in evaluating clusters, which is the data that takes longer to service. Mid-January, we saw 3 distinct ZABU decks gaining some steam near the top of our rankings on win rate, cube gain, and population. That was when we knew a change would be necessary, but the next patch was already locked in, which brings us to the balanced patch, which went live yesterday. Now ZABU used to be a 3-2 ongoing. Your forward cards cost 1 less. and a minimum of 1. Now, ZABU is a 2-cost card. It's an ongoing card, and your 4-cost cards are only going to cost 1 less instead of 2 less. Moving ZABU's cost reduction from 2 to 1 reduces the potential energy reduction of the cat, making it harder to hide the game-winning amounts of power until turn 6 to empty your hand for a Dracula. Yeah, and that is one thing that you could. You could play a lot of cards, and a lot of cards that were 4-cost cards before the introduction of ZABU were gaining a lot of popularity. And now some of them are going to be on the loser of the list because they're probably not going to be as popular now that ZABU's use is a little more narrow. It also breaks up the Spider-Man Absorbing Man combo, which was stronger than we like, which also means it breaks the Spider-Man Moon Girl combo, which gives you double Spider-Mans. Pretty much is the same thing. And it was just kind of not fun when you were on turn 5. Someone played that and you would only be able to play in 1 lane instead of 2 lanes, and this is a game that you got to win 2 out of 3 locations, so it made it very rough to play in that kind of meta. Sliding him in down to 2 costs hopefully refunds enough tempo to retain the fun of building around various 4-cost cards. We expect ZABU decks to look a bit different, but still have competitive builds, and I think they will still be competitive. I just don't think they're going to be the top end decks in the meta. Unless these certain scenarios arise, which we're going to talk about. All right, Silver Surfer also got nerfed. This change is oddly linked to ZABU. It's been a top 5 card in top 5 decks since release, but steadied and gained cubes slower once players adapted. Until ZABU arrived. During the Savage Lands, Silver Surfer was an unlikely hero in the best overall deck. However, it had some positive matchups over against 75% of the field, which meant it threatened to become too dominant once we adjusted ZABU. So this Silver Surfer adjustment is more in relation to these ZABU decks being out of the meta, and this one potentially being way too strong. And Silver Surfer was a very, very strong card. Before ZABU, before the ZABU decks, it was people were finding counters to these, but ZABU kind of brought this back into the meta. So before, Silver Surfer was a 3-0 card. On reveal, give your 3-cost cards plus 3 power. Now it is a 3-2 card, so it's going to give a little bit of power, but the on reveal will give you the 3-cost cards plus 2 power instead of plus 3 power. This change aims to mainly keep mostly the Surfer decks viable, just weaker. We're specifically happy to carry power onto Surfer himself because it makes figuring out where he'll be played more interesting for both players and lets us fine-tune his strength. Those gains unfortunately come at the expense of some cool Mr. Negative decks that we have enjoyed seeing. So yes, unfortunately, some of those Mr. Negative decks are not going to be as viable, but maybe there's some great deck builders that could still find ways to build some of those nuances into some of these current meta decks. For now, we expect these patches to be the primary way to deliver balance changes. Our internal processes aren't designed to do these impromptu changes regularly yet. We'll often want to make more substantial changes than this tool allows. However, we may experiment with slightly more frequent balance changes on a smaller scale to see if there's even a better experience for our players at our fingertips. Thanks for reading. Good luck on your snap. But let's go into the game now and talk about some of the big winners and losers from this recent balance update. And one of the big winners is some of these meta deck cards like She-Hulk. One of my favorite decks was that She-Hulk Infinite deck that I talked about last week on the channel. That deck just got a lot stronger because all the Surfer decks got weaker, all the ZABU decks got weaker. Other cards in that same vein, Shuri decks, those Shuri Zero decks with Red Skull, they all got a lot stronger as well. So Shuri by default got a lot stronger. And the current season pass card, MODOK. These discard decks with Hela, with Morbius, well, they all went up in value as well because you're no longer having to face these strong ZABU decks or these strong Surfer decks. Another card that got a little bit of a bump is Mystique. Now, she still works in all the decks that she worked in before, these Wong decks, these Patriot decks, but you could still make ZABU work like he used to work if you draw ZABU onto, and there's a less of a chance to draw ZABU onto than it was to get ZABU by 3, so that makes him a little worse. But with Mystique, if you get ZABU on 2, and then you play Mystique on 3, well, you could still have that same -2 power or -2 cost for all of your 4-cost cards, so you're getting that ZABU effect twice, so could still get that. And then the other big archetype that ZABU fit into was that Darkhawk archetype. Now you can still play ZABU early on, and then you can play Darkhawk on 4, or Darkhawk and Mystique both on 6, because ZABU will reduce that 4-cost Darkhawk card into a 3-cost, and you could play Darkhawk and Mystique getting both of those effects. So Mystique got a little bit of a bump. I think she's going to get a little more play in the next coming weeks, but we will see. Next card that got a little bump, we talked about him in relation to Mystique, and that is Patriot. Now, this is a deck that was in the meta. These Patriot Ultron decks were very, very strong, and you could still use these Patriot decks in combination with Silver Surfer, with cards like Mr. Sinister and Brood that don't have any abilities, and Surfers could still buff cards like Brood and cards like Patriot and Mystique that are 3 costs. So I think Patriot combo decks with Silver Surfer are still going to be strong, maybe not as strong as they used to be. And then in these kind of decks, a card that got a lot stronger is Debris, because Debris is a 3-cost card, so going to be benefited by Silver Surfer. And it also puts a bunch of rocks in the field, which are cards with no abilities. So Patriot is going to benefit them as well. So those are some of the winners. Let me know who some of the biggest winners you see with these nerfs are your deck. But let's talk about some of the biggest losers. And yeah, you got to mention ZABU himself. ZABU went from a 3-2 now to went from a 3-2 to a 2-2, which is still a good card. You're getting less cost. You could get him out earlier, but you want to try to get this card out as soon as possible. If you don't pull him on turn 2, you're not going to be able to play a 4-cost card on turn 3. So you want to try to get him now on turn 2. So you're going to have, if you're trying to play him on turn 2, you're going to have 6 cards that have drawn from your deck normally at that time, which means at that point, you're going to get a 50% chance to get ZABU at the right time. A little more. It goes up to 58% if you have America Chavez in your deck. Now, post-nerf, you're going to need about 5 cards instead of 6 cards, which means that you're going to get a 42% chance to drop to get ZABU on the turn that you want. So almost a 10% chance reduction that you're going to get ZABU on the chance he wants. If you have America Chavez, then that it goes up to 45.5, but it's still a lot less than where he was previously at the post stuff. So ZABU decks got a lot worse. You're not going to be able to play those big Spider-Man plays. You're not going to be playing a lot of these high-end 4-cost cards. And because ZABU is not reducing the cost of the 4-cost cards by as much, all these 4-cost cards got a little bit of a nerf as well, especially these cards that you were only starting to play in these ZABU decks. There's a couple cards that got a lot more popular when ZABU came to the field. One of them is Spider-Man, and that was that big combo that we talked about. You can't do that Spider-Man combo with a Spider-Man and Moon Girl, or that Spider-Man absorbing combo to block out a couple locations on that turn. So Spider-Man got a little bit worse, which I think is good. That was not a fun combo to play against, and it wasn't really a fun combo to do as well, because as you know, when you lock down those locations, your opponent would normally retreat and not give you all those cubes you want. Another card that was very popular and is probably not going to be as popular fitting into a multitude of these ZABU decks is going to be Crossbones, just because you're not running as many 4-cost cards in these ZABU decks, because he's not reducing those cards and giving you those big plays. A lot of these 4-cost cards are going to be out of these ZABU decks. I think one of the big candidates for that is Crossbones. At 2-8, that was an awesome tempo. At 3-8, it's still awesome tempo, but you're going to have to make sure that you're winning at the location, and you're going to have to take out another card that may be a little more valuable in this deck. So Spider-Man, Crossbones both got a little less value. Last card that I want to talk about is Brood. Now, Brood got hurt a little bit in these Silver Surfer decks. Having Silver Surfer give them 3 power down to 2 power is kind of a big difference. Now, that means that Brood's potential power, just a Brood and Surfer alone, could go from 15, now it's down to 12, which means that Brood alone could potentially win a lane before the nerf. Now, he still could win a lane, but it's a little more questionable there. So that is the big winners and losers, in my opinion, post-patch. That is why they did this patch, and that is what's happening. So let me know who you think are some other winners and losers. Are there some characters that are actually benefited and losing from this? Should some of these characters not be on the winners and losers list? Let me know your thoughts on this nerf, this balance update. I will see you guys next time. Hopefully enjoy this video and hopefully make sense of what is going on in the meta game for you right now. If you haven't already, check out some of the other videos. Subscribe to the channel. Check me out on social media. I'll see you guys next time. Make sure you give me that Hulk fist before you go. Make sure you have a great rest of your day. Hulk fist bump, ValleyFlyin out.